Some people carry their deepest pain entirely silently, terrified of letting anyone see their internal struggle. Because they deeply fear becoming a burden, you swallow your own tears so others will not worry. So your heavy emotions stay completely hidden, safely locked away behind a carefully constructed, calm smile. Your genuine needs become absolute silence. You stop asking for help, utterly convinced your struggles are inconveniences. And profound loneliness suddenly feels significantly safer than the terrifying risk of being too much for someone. Because asking for help feels incredibly heavy, as if you are carelessly dumping your crushing weight onto them. Your anxious mind constantly keeps apologizing for simply existing, carrying an invisible, suffocating debt of deep guilt. Even when absolutely nobody asked you to, you instinctively shrink yourself down to take up less emotional space. The paralyzing fear grows quietly in the shadows, constantly questioning if people actually, genuinely want you around. What if I emotionally exhaust the people I love? What if my constant sadness totally drains their energy? What if my deep, lingering pain eventually becomes far too much, and they finally decide to walk away? So your heavy heart carries absolutely everything completely alone, enduring the crushing isolation just to protect them. Not because you are weak or incapable. Your profound silence is actually an exhausting, deeply misguided act of love. But because intense, misplaced guilt taught you absolute silence, making you wrongly believe your needs are inherently selfish, you painfully learned emotional distance, perfecting the exhausting art of suffering right next to people without ever speaking. To desperately protect others from your pain, you absorb every single ounce of darkness so they can feel light. Even while your own precious soul grows incredibly tired, practically breaking under the immense, unshared emotional pressure. And deep inside the quiet ache, you desperately wonder if your true, unfiltered, heavy self matters to anyone at all. You begin hiding your struggles carefully. Every heavy emotion is perfectly concealed behind a convincing, practiced, and calm smile. Not because you actually want absolute isolation. Deep down, your weary spirit desperately craves genuine, safe, and unconditional connection. But because intense guilt feels so much stronger than comfort, you constantly feel like a massive, exhausting emotional burden. Your deepest emotions feel incredibly heavy, exactly like a massive anchor dragging you down into a freezing, silent ocean. Like they massively inconvenience absolutely everyone around you. You completely shrink your presence to avoid causing any possible trouble. So your agonizing pain stays entirely unspoken. You swallow your desperate tears entirely before they can ever possibly fall. Even your profound exhaustion becomes completely hidden. You faithfully carry an enormous invisible weight while pretending everything is perfectly fine. Because simply needing help feels deeply shameful, you fiercely believe you should be completely capable of surviving this alone. You find yourself apologizing entirely too much, constantly saying sorry for taking up space, for feeling, and for hurting. Even just for existing, an irrational, quiet guilt constantly convinces you that your mere presence requires endless, exhausting justification. The crushing loneliness naturally deepens silently. Separating yourself completely feels exactly like the ultimate, totally necessary act of love. Your fundamental worth begins feeling incredibly fragile. The heavy isolation slowly, carefully convinces you that you are entirely unlovable. Genuine connection feels impossibly difficult now. Stepping into the warm light requires a terrifying amount of courage you completely lack. Because your anxious mind severely fears rejection constantly, it perfectly anticipates total abandonment every single time you attempt vulnerability. What if people inevitably become completely tired of me? What if my heavy sadness finally exhausts their generous patience? What if my complex emotions are simply far too much? The terrifying, constant thought keeps you securely locked away. So absolute silence becomes your primary protection. The thick, quiet walls guarantee that you cannot disappoint anyone ever again. And the heavy pain stays buried even deeper. You fade gracefully into the background, becoming entirely and completely invisible. Even while your severely exhausted soul grows considerably weaker, the massive effort to stay perfectly quiet is completely draining. And your weary heart quietly, desperately longs to feel completely wanted again, to simply be held without any apologies. Eventually, the silence becomes completely familiar. You grow intimately accustomed to suffering without ever making a single sound. You entirely stop expressing your genuine needs. You convince yourself that asking for comfort is an unforgivable imposition. Your true emotions stay perfectly hidden automatically. Hiding becomes an exhausting reflex rather than a conscious, deliberate choice. Because your weary heart absolutely fears becoming unwanted, the terror of being rejected keeps you securely locked away. Even around people, you can stand in a crowded, warm room and still feel like a completely invisible ghost. You feel entirely and profoundly emotionally distant. A heavy, thick glass wall separates you from everyone you truly love. Disconnected, your inner world becomes a completely isolated island, desperately floating entirely out of reach from secure shores. Quietly invisible, you expertly erase your own presence, making certain that nobody ever has to accommodate your heavy feelings. The crushing loneliness deepens slowly. It aggressively wraps around your soul, convincing you that complete isolation is entirely necessary. And your fragile self-worth weakens silently. You begin genuinely believing that you simply do not deserve true, unconditional care. You still desperately want genuine connection. A beautiful, tiny spark inside continuously aches for an authentic, safe, loving embrace. But paralyzing fear keeps holding your fragile heart back. The absolute terror of ruining their happiness stops your reaching hand. Because toxic emotional guilt still quietly whispers, it constantly feeds your anxious mind, agonizing, completely false, and devastating narratives. Maybe I'm simply way too much. Maybe my complicated, incredibly heavy sadness is fundamentally ruining their beautiful, light days. Maybe people feel completely exhausted around me. You mistakenly assume your mere presence drains all the joy from their lives. So the weary soul becomes even quieter. You shrink down into an incredibly small, perfectly silent and hidden shadow, still desperately hoping someone genuinely understands, wishing they could magically see through your perfect smile into the invisible silent ache. Still deeply longing for absolute emotional safety, a secure, enduring place where your heavy tears are not treated like burdens. Still desperately wanting to finally feel worthy, yearning to be held and beautifully reassured without having to constantly apologize first. and secretly hoping their love does not entirely disappear, praying they will gracefully stay despite your heavily guarded, silent pain. Jesus sees the exhaustion you hide. He looks completely beneath your convincing smile and recognizes your absolutely drained spirit. Even the profound guilt nobody notices, the heavy invisible burden of feeling like an endless inconvenience to absolutely everyone. He deeply understands silent emotional pain. He knows precisely why you desperately decided it was safer to stop speaking. The agonizing loneliness. He sees the thick, isolating walls you built simply to keep from bothering those standing nearby. The paralyzing fear of becoming too much. The constant, quiet terror that your heavy tears will chase love away. And the crushing pressure you carry alone. The immense effort required to constantly shrink yourself into the quiet background. Because your precious soul was never meant to suffer silently. You were not designed to absorb every sorrow alone. And you were never meant to carry absolutely everything alone. The crushing weight was never yours to hold securely. Your existence is absolutely not a burden. Needing comfort, gentle grace, and genuine help does not make you weak. Not to Jesus. Your complex, incredibly heavy emotions will never overwhelm his boundless capacity to beautifully, endlessly love you. Grace does not become exhausted by your pain. It never demands that you apologize for your very real tears. He stays eternally patient with wounded hearts. He sits gracefully with you in the darkest, most incredibly isolating spaces. Gentle, his deeply comforting presence demands absolutely nothing, offering profound relief to your exhausted, highly vigilant, and fearful mind. Safe, he perfectly invites you to finally lay down the agonizing pretense and genuinely breathe without any lingering guilt. Because profound healing begins exactly where shame loses power, where you realize your true vulnerability is fully, unconditionally welcomed. And toxic emotional guilt begins softening. The devastating lie that you are unlovable completely shatters inside his radiant truth. Your deep wounds are absolutely not an inconvenience. They are tender, beautiful places crying out for divine, secure restoration. They simply need endless compassion. He carefully shields your delicate, flickering spirit from the harsh winds of deep anxiety. The exhausted soul slowly breathes easier, releasing the massive burden of surviving completely silently. You find enduring, true rest. Little by beautiful little, the stormy, frantic waves of self-doubt peacefully settle into a calm, undeniably clear, secure mirror. The weary heart begins feeling genuinely safe again, unlearning the deep reflex to constantly apologize for taking up space. Because unconditional love remains, it absolutely refuses to walk away when your internal world becomes far too messy or heavy. Even beside emotionally exhausted hearts, his secure devotion beautifully outlasts your absolute darkest, most terrifying, and deeply isolating seasons. And grace absolutely never sees you as too much. You are completely known, deeply cherished, and eternally, safely held. Healing begins when profound shame finally loses its absolute control over your deeply exhausted mind. You slowly realize that not all of your complex emotions are incredibly heavy, exhausting burdens, and not all of your deeply authentic pain must stay perfectly hidden away in silence. Your heavily guarded heart slowly relaxes, beautifully trusting that the terrifying storm has completely passed. Because his divine grace brings absolute emotional safety, tenderly holding the fragile pieces together securely. Not immense pressure, he entirely removes the crushing expectation that you must constantly fix yourself. Your profoundly weary soul breathes incredibly differently now, deeply inhaling genuine, lasting, and unconditional comfort. The agonizing guilt softens slowly, the terrifying urge to endlessly apologize beautifully and entirely fades. Your inherent, fundamental worth returns quietly, carefully replacing the suffocating lie that you are unlovable. Because genuine healing stayed, his deeply comforting presence proved to be an incredibly reliable sanctuary. You completely stop apologizing for simply existing, finally stepping securely into the warm, inviting light. Little by beautiful little, the massive, invisible walls of your isolating fortress naturally fall down. The crushing loneliness powerfully loosens its tight grip, beautifully replaced by an enduring, safe connection. The paralyzing fear completely weakens. You miraculously realize that your heavy sadness won't ruin everything. He works beautifully, especially inside deeply wounded hearts that have spent years running on survival. And lasting emotional peace slowly returns, washing over your deeply exhausted spirit with profound relief. You begin beautifully seeing yourself differently, no longer completely defined by the invisible, heavy burdens. Not as a terrifying burden, you miraculously understand that your true needs are completely acceptable, but precisely as someone deeply, authentically loved, a beautifully fragile soul entirely cherished by him, and finally completely worthy of profound compassion too. You safely lay down the exhausting silence. Peace feels unfamiliar at first. When your mind is accustomed to constant, heavy emotional apologizing, genuine quiet feels entirely foreign. Because your weary heart carried profound guilt far too long, you lived in constant fear of being too much. But slowly, the intense pressure fades. The crushing expectation to hide your sadness beautifully melts into clear, welcoming waters. Your deeply exhausted soul breathes much easier now. The suffocating, invisible weight is gently lifted from your tired shoulders. Not perfectly, you still have small moments of hesitation, carefully wondering if this newfound security is actually real. But peacefully, the terrifying inner storms have finally settled into a smooth, radiant, and incredibly safe emotional sanctuary. Because true healing remained closely beside you, the divine light surrounding your fractured spirit proved it would never leave. And your tender wounds no longer define your core worth. You beautifully understand that needing comfort is completely acceptable. Divine grace teaches heavily exhausted hearts how to safely rest again. He gently reminds you to finally stop running. Even after years of profound emotional shame, his radiant warmth beautifully fills the empty spaces where loneliness previously lived. The agonizing guilt slowly, carefully loosens. The tight grip of constantly anticipating rejection completely softens inside his steady love. The deep, quiet loneliness completely softens. You no longer have to build massive walls to protect others from yourself. And your weary heart feels significantly lighter. The enormous effort required to remain perfectly silent is beautifully washed away. Because genuine love no longer feels conditional, you realize that your authentic tears will absolutely never chase him away. Your soul finally feels emotionally safe resting, Under his steadfast watch, the terrifying urge to apologize entirely disappears. And absolute silence no longer feels completely necessary for survival. You can beautifully exist in the open, fully loved. Your existence is absolutely not a burden. Taking up space in this world is your beautiful, fundamental right. Neither are your emotions. Your profound sadness and incredibly complex feelings are entirely welcome in the warm light. Healing beautifully changes the way your weary heart sees itself, replacing deep shame with absolute, enduring grace. Little by beautiful little, the terrifying narrative of feeling emotionally too heavy gently and entirely loses its power. The deeply suffocating shame begins completely disappearing. You realize that your authentic pain is incredibly safe to share, because divine grace securely stayed beside you. His unwavering love beautifully anchored your intensely frantic, heavily exhausted mind. Even during your hidden, silent exhaustion, when you quietly felt entirely unlovable, his warm presence never once retreated. Even during your profound emotional silence, he patiently listened to the heavy, desperate tears you completely refused to cry. Your deep pain no longer controls your true worth. You are completely defined by his limitless, unconditional compassion. And your exhausted soul feels genuinely lighter again. The immense, isolating burden of perfection is finally, completely removed. Because true healing restores incredibly gently. It tenderly pieces together the deeply bruised fragments of your precious spirit. He especially cares for heavily wounded hearts. His secure sanctuary provides endless rest for your completely drained resilience. You slowly, beautifully stop apologizing for simply existing. The intense, agonizing guilt is entirely replaced by true freedom. And you finally begin genuinely believing your life still matters deeply. Your beautiful, authentic self is profoundly wanted. Maybe your beautiful heart was absolutely never too much. Perhaps the world simply misunderstood your immense, profound depth. Maybe it was simply carrying too much alone. You bravely held an entire universe of unspoken, heavy sorrow. Too much deep guilt, the agonizing, constant feeling that your mere existence was somehow a terrible, heavy inconvenience. Too much emotional pressure, the completely exhausting, endless demand to remain perfectly silent while desperately drowning inside. Too much hidden pain. You faithfully carried incredible emotional weight to protect everyone else from your own sadness. And Jesus stayed right beside your silent exhaustion. He never once looked away from your heavily burdened, tired spirit. Even during the profound loneliness, when you felt entirely invisible, his divine comfort remained an absolutely secure sanctuary. Even during deep emotional shame, when you constantly apologized for taking up space, he patiently held your weary soul. Because true healing happens incredibly patiently. Grace absolutely refuses to rush your delicate, beautiful return to emotional safety. Quietly, the terrifying loud storms of intense self-doubt slowly settle into a smooth, brilliant, and deeply clear reflection. Tenderly, he waits with you faithfully, allowing your exhausted spirit to completely unlearn its heavy, isolating defense mechanisms. Until the weary soul finally believes it deserves love too, securely enveloped in his boundless, completely unconditional devotion. Your existence is not a burden. Taking up beautiful space in this world is your absolute, undeniable, and divine right. Neither are your emotions. Your profound tears and heavy sadness are entirely welcome within his deeply comforting, enduring light. Healing slowly changes the way the heart sees itself, beautifully replacing intense, paralyzing shame with pure, absolute, unconditional grace. And grace slowly restores your worth again. Standing completely safe beside him, you realize you never have to hide. Because your soul was always worthy of love, you are an incredibly precious creation, not an exhausting, heavy inconvenience. And your heart finally learns to rest without shame. Surrounded completely by his warmth, you are entirely, beautifully free.